Joining us today for Scott Josephson's webinar, Eating for Energy and Performance. My name is Jason Gould, and I work for Canfor Pro in the Education Department. I just want to let you know a few details before we start today. So first, Scott will do his best to answer your questions. If you think you have a question during the presentation, just write it down on the panel on your screen, and Scott will be able to answer it. Second, if you would like to earn CCs for attending the webinar, there will be a quiz available to you on Monday through your Canfor Pro member portal on Canfor Pro Interactive. As well, within a week, the recorded copy of the webinar will be available on Interactive as well as the Canfor Pro YouTube channel. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's presentation, we encourage you to register for Canfor Pro Toronto Conference August 6th to 10th to see Scott present 4 more sessions over the course of the weekend. So registration is now available and open on canforpro.com. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Scott. He's an award-winning international conference speaker who has published over 100 times and has been featured in educational webinars, videos, and DVDs sold worldwide. He serves on numerous boards of prestigious fitness organizations and has been named Director of the Year, Specialty Presenter of the Year, and Citizen of the Year. Scott has worked with many celebrity clients from TV, film, and music, as well as athletes from the New York Mets and Giants. Enjoy the webinar, everyone. Take it away, Scott.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I deeply appreciate it. I know it's your lunch hour, so again, thanks for joining and doing what you need to do. I've got a lot of material I'm going to try to cover and push forward as best as I can, so just bear with me in the process. And again, I'm a passionate guy. I'll pour a lot out. You get a lot out of this in the process, so please, take notes and do what you got to do. And as Jason said, thanks for the great introduction. Join us in Toronto. It's really the best convention in the world, and I'm really proud to be part of CanFit Pro, and I don't say that lightly. I'm 10 years on board and 5 years as an advisory board member on the international side here in the States. So here we go, and this should be really helpful for you and your clients and anybody else you're trying to work with across the board. So let me just push on forward and get to the, my apology, let me just get to the next slide. Here we go. All right, so when you talk about nutrition, this is a big baseline piece that I want to start at, and I kind of want to break it down into some strategy pieces. If you look at supplementation, in all fairness, the HMB and the DHB and the creatine, these are all great things, but at the end of the day, give yourself about a 5% advantage. If you do it right, if you cycle right, if you take stuff right, it's going to help in your performance, but it's not the do-all, end-all, be-all type of thing. So look at it about a 5% scenario. Nutrient timing is a word I'm going to talk a lot about throughout this process, and that 30%, break this down. So if you want to highlight, bold, and circle anything, this is it. Carbs, protein, before, during, and after training. How much carbs, how much protein, how much fat, what am I really consuming for nutrient timing before, during, and after my training? And what's the percentage of protein? In all fairness, this industry is really, really high on protein, and that's a big generalization, but I have to tell you, calorically, we spend a lot of time and a lot of digestion breaking down protein. And protein, of course, is the powerhouse to fuel some muscle cells, but at the end of the day, your sweat equity and your hard work is really what's going to get you the body of your choice and your client's choice. So protein is certainly a great tool, but we have a tendency, and I say this in a very generalized world, to go a little bit over on protein. And fluids is going to be important too. And before I put the cart in front of the horse, I also want to share fluids should really be about half your body weight in fluid ounces. If we all talk about drinking 2 liters or 64 ounces, we go by ounces in the States and sometimes liters in Canada, often it's not enough. If I'm a 180-pound guy like I am, why would I drink the same amount of fluids as a 110-pound gymnast or a 300-pound, NFL lineman? So really try to break your body weight in half and try to consume that in fluids. At the end of the day, take this, and this is a really big key before we move on. There's 6 body parts. We all exercise 6 body parts. Chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, legs. Chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, legs. There's only 6 food groups: dairy, fat, fruits, vegetable, carbs, and protein. Again, dairy, fat, fruits, vegetable, carbs, and protein. So those are real important to break down. And dairy can go either way. I can spend all day giving you pros and cons of dairy, but if you look at this screen, it talks about fats, fruits, veggies, carbs, and protein. So let's look at foundation as really half your diet, 30% as far as nutrient training or nutrient timing, carbs, proteins before, during, and after, and supplementation at about 5%. Look at the left of the screen. It adds up to 90%. And the punchline there is trial and error. That's really the bottom line. Trial and error. 10%. Everybody's body is different. So that's going to be really crucial. So factor that in, that everyone's a little different, and you have 10% of a marginal component for trial and error. Let's jump on. Oop, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay. You look at fitness protocol. Now, this is a big key. I always say know your patient, know your client. So who are we exercising? And this is what you have to break down. Is this you or the person you're trying to help? I look at a goal and say, is there even a goal? Is the goal maybe to decrease some fat, increase some muscle, change the aesthetics of someone's body? Do they train about an hour a day? Is it 2 to 3 times a week? It sounds like a client to me, a couple times a week, about an hour a day. Probably minimal muscle damage. Recovery, probably not much of an issue. And really, is there even adequate fuel in this individual? Did they eat enough? When do they eat? How often do they eat? So these are things to address before you even start to look at eating for energy and eating for performance. Know who you're working with. Is this you or is this the person you're working with? And the reason I share that is if you move on forward, these guys or these athletes or real athletes, even us as real athletes, we definitely differ. We're looking for strength. We're looking for a weight ratio. We're looking for size. We're looking for performance. And when I mean size, I don't mean large. I mean more muscle ratio to body fat ratio. When you exercise hard, you potentially can get moderate to severe muscle damage. Often we might train maybe an hour, 2 hours a day, sometimes once or twice a day. Your body's at risk for a low immune function, unquestionably, because you break your body down when you train with great intensity. And you're at risk for a fuel depletion. It's very easy to run out of gas. And keep this in mind, too. You can't run your car without gasoline. You can't run your body without fuel. So it's really important for critical recovery. So who are we? Are we an athlete or are we a fitness individual? And you have to define that for you or the person you're trying to help before you dive into percentages of carbs, protein, and fats. Otherwise, it's a one-size-fit-all. And that'll never, ever work if it's a one-size-fit-all. Moving forward, you look at athletes, and here's the difference of some of the needs for someone who is an athlete. The myofibril side of it, muscle tissue, you're going to need a little bit more amino acid to develop. Some amino acids could come through foods and or supplementation. That's going to be key. Nutrient loss. I live in Florida, so I'm going to dehydrate potentially a little quicker than someone who's in the northern environment because of the climate. So my micronutrient loss, my electrolytes, my sodium, my magnesium, my potassium, my chloride, that can drop a little quicker. And again, training with intensity, these electrolytes will plummet. Your metabolic stressors, your vitamin Bs, those fly from the wayside. So these are things you have to look to replenish, B1, B6, B12, folic acid. Again, if you're training for any type of performance. You don't have to be a pro, but if you got some intensity in the wheelhouse, those vitamin Bs are going to be a necessity. Your glutamine is going to be a necessity. That's a repairing tool. It's the most abundant amino acid in your body. So you have to keep in mind, you lose that the most, you want to replenish that. That's done through food. That's done through supplementation. And your antioxidant needs, that's a major, major thing that I'll talk about all through this webinar. Your A's, your C's, your E's, those are really, really crucial. So ACEs, antioxidants, another very, very big vital tool. And let's talk about some of these things across the board. When you exercise, you need nutrients as intake. And you can see on the top, I call it fuel. Again, look at like you're driving a car. You're going to put fuel in your tank. So what type of exercise are you doing depends on what type of fuel you're really going to need to provide the best energy levels for yourself. Now work from the bottom up on this slide. Let's look at those examples. If you're running 1 to 2 miles, you can't sprint that. If I asked you to run 100 yards or 100 meters, you can sprint that. You'd go all out. You'd use your maximum heart rate. So an example here, some of the group exercise classes, the body pumps, the 1 to 2 mile runs, probably about 85% or less of your maximum heart rate. If you look up towards the top of the screen where it says duration, these are extended minutes. These exercises are longer in duration. These aren't, again, a short run or 3 reps or a couple of heavy squats. So the source you're utilizing as energy is glycogen and some fatty acids. That's the primary source of your fuel. And look at the top of the screen where it says moderate training relies on glucose and fat. So that's your primary fuel source. The reason I share that is when you train with some form of intensity, whether you're looking for hypertrophy, hyperplasia, an increase in muscle size, an increase in muscle fiber size, You rely on glucose and ATP, meaning adenosine triphosphate. That's a bit more of your primary source. Now, take a look at a slide and go towards the bottom. Lots of squats, lots of shoulder presses, 100-yard sprint. Look at your intensity. That's all out. You're in the trenches. You're going super, super hard. Your duration is normally less than 30 seconds. That's a very big difference than reps that take a longer window of time, longer duration, group exercise programs, 1 to 2 miles run. So your source of energy is going to be a little bit different. So you have to define, what am I training for? What am I doing on a regular basis? What type of fuel do I need to put in the tank? So the nutrient intake is definitely going to vary based upon the type of exercise or the goal that you have for you or you have for the individual that you're providing services for. Generally speaking, and this is a good generalization, but it's a pretty good window you should try to occupy and work from within. Carbohydrates, roughly half your plate. Now, I show 45 to 65%. I'm using FDA numbers or Health Canada numbers. This is pretty good standard procedure. Per every 2,000 calories that you ingest or you intake, about 130 grams are utilized for optimal brain function. So in all fairness, when we look at low-carb dieting, and again, this isn't about Zone, Sugar Busters, Atkins, Eat Right for Your Blood Type, any one of the popular diets, low carbs, you're going to hit a wall. Low carbs, you're not going to function all that well. Low carbs, you're not going to provide tremendous amount of energy to your brain. And when you look at 130 grams per 2,000 calories, that's really a bare minimal number. So based upon caloric intake, 45 to 65% of your diet, pretty much call it half. In most cases, should be some form of carbohydrates. There's only 3 nutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins. Most examples, fat comes from a jar, teaspoons and tablespoons, mayonnaise, oil, butter, cream cheese, nuts, olive oil, things like that. You added fats to food. There is fat in chicken, fish, tuna, turkey, egg whites, cottage cheese, whatever you might need, but fats are an added fat. If you go too low in fats, take a look at your nails, take a look at your hair. They start to dry out a little bit. It's a telltale sign. So often, sometimes, about 20 to 30% is a standard number. And you got to have a numbers game. Your body is a business you live in 24/7. Keep that in mind as you prepare to put in the quality caloric intake and break it down in nutrient content. There's only carbs, there's only fats, and there's protein. I've always shared for a lot of years that protein has eyes, a face, and a mother. And it's a pretty good line to go with because chicken, fish, tuna, turkey, egg whites, cottage cheese are protein. And there's no Mrs. Mayonnaise, there's no Mrs. Ice Cream, there's no Mrs. Jelly Beans. They never lived. So they're not a protein source. 10 to 35% is definitely an adequate intake. And let me share this with you from a physiological standpoint. And this is important. Your body excretes about 5 to 6% protein every day, 5 to 6%. So that's something you should replenish. When you have 10 to 35%, that's a very fair window of protein intake. The higher you go, the potential, lack of better verbiage, more issues you could create. A blood test never lies. One of the few things in life that never lies. But look at fibrinogen, look at homocysteine, look at cholesterol, look at BUN, look at creatinine. Those are markers that can rise and pretty quickly from a really, really, really high protein intake. And I don't want to delve into this too hard, but I also always use the philosophy of use, abuse, and misuse. You know, you can use it, you can even misuse it, but once you abuse it, you're going to have consequences. Higher than 35% can be quite high, and generally speaking, the industry often is a little high in that window. So just go by numbers as a stepping stone, as a set of rules, as a set of guidelines to try to stay within. It's going to help. Here's your nutrients, and here's what I just want to break down so you get a good understanding. You consume carbohydrates as 4 calories to a gram. Average serving size, average portion size is about 15 grams. It's about 60 calories. So at the end of the day, how many serving sizes did you consume, or 60-calorie serving size portions of 15 grams did you consume to give you between 45 and 65% of your caloric intake? That's a fair game. That's a fair number to try to look at. Protein, as I mentioned, Again, all your proteins are roughly 7 grams in an ounce. But look at number 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's different kinds of protein based on A, caloric intake, and B, the amount of fat in the servings. So if protein has 7 grams in an ounce, you have 4 different types: very lean, lean, medium, fat, and high. And I'll give you an example of each one so you can get a good idea. Look at very lean proteins. They're probably white in color. Probably. Chicken, fish, turkey, egg whites, cottage cheese. They're probably about 35 calories in an ounce. How big's an ounce? About the size of your thumb or an ice cube. So you're looking at about 35 calories, about a half a gram of fat. You jump down to a lean protein, it has a little more calories, 55 calories, and 3 grams of fat. Here's an example of that. Something probably pink in color, salmon, filet mignon. You jump down to a medium fat, 75 calories to an ounce, 5 grams of fat. Here's an example of that, like a marbleized meat, like a T-bone, like a sirloin. Some of the meat's a little bit higher in fat, a little bit higher in calories. Something that normally has a bone, like I mentioned, like a T-bone steak. Eggs, Parmesan cheese. So they're all a little higher. At the end of the day, go right back to that little yellow icon that says protein. They all have 7 grams in an ounce. The question is how many calories and how much fat in that serving size. High fat, 100 calories per ounce. Bacon, salami, sausage, spare ribs. All real yummy, but higher in fat, higher in calories. At the end of the day, they all still have 7 grams per ounce. So when you look at proteins, pick and choose wisely, because you have very lean, lean, medium fat, and high. Again, 7 grams per ounce, but the punchline is how many calories and how many grams of fat are you dealing with in that serving size to get that 10 to 35% caloric intake each day. Fats, as I mentioned, from a jar, and look at the eyeballs rolling down below because you got to think here. Very easy to overdo. 9 calories per gram, 5 grams, average serving size, 45 calories. What's that mean? Teaspoons and tablespoons. Butter, cream cheese, oil, peanut butter. Those are simple examples. 4 different types. Monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated, and trans fats. I can get into this all day, but the punchline here, monounsaturated, probably your better choices. Polys as your second. Saturated fats is the artery clogging villain, and trans fats meaning the absolute worst kind, like a liquid which turns into a solid. An example, the inside of a Twinkie, which is a white solid, was once a liquid. Now it's a trans fat. So just giving you some easy windows in dietary intake as far as breakdown would go. Good rule of thumb, and I always like to do these and say, hey, what did I take away besides a couple funny pictures? What did he really have to say? Well, a rule of thumb in most cases, and this is just good science that's behind this. Clark, Gittleman, Kleiner, all really good writers, all people that do stuff with power eating, Penn State, really solid research, share approximately the same thing. The rule of thumb is about 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight or more. Can't get anywhere if you undereat, but that's a baseline number. Now let me dive into that a little bit, because if you're looking for what I refer to as healthy weight achievement, weight loss 101, I need to lose 10 or 20 or 30 pounds, probably not your number. If you're looking for energy, if you're looking for performance, if you're looking for a little hypertrophy, hyperplasia, I want to make sure my caloric intake matches my exercise energy output, you should probably be in about 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight or more. Take your weight, divide it by 2.2. That's what you weigh in kilograms. Here in the States, it's all pounds. So again, take your weight, divide by 2.2. That's what you weigh in kilograms. Somewhere about 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight. Next line says your intake varies on FFM, fat-free mass. How many people are you working with that yo-yoed up and down, that went from Zone, Atkins, Sugar Busters, Eat Right for your blood type? You know, French women don't get fat, every diet under the sun. So what type of fat-free mass do they have? What's their body type? And what's their history? What I mean by body type, are they ectomorphic, short and compact? Are they endomorphic, more long and lean? Or are they mesomorphic, more in the middle of the road? So always go back that everybody's body is different. Key point here, definite takeaway, protein pre and post training. Pre and post. Helps increase your myofibrils, meaning muscle density, muscle tissue, opportunity to build more muscle and protein base in your body, and decreasing your catabolism, lowering your catabolic effects, which is major stressors on your body post-training. Total calorie intake is crucial for performance. So you got to make sure your calorie intake is in there. In order to perform well, again, go back to the one thing I said. You can't run your car without gasoline. You can't run your body without calorie intake. Here's a little sample, all right? Look at the top. Somebody most likely is a 125-pound female. Either you know, perhaps you, someone you're training, sister, friend, cousin, uncle, aunt, whatever it might be, 125-pounder. They weigh about 57 kilograms. How? 125, 2.2 equals 57 kilograms. So if you look at 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight, you're taking that 57 kilogram individual and looking at 35 calories, it's 2,000 calories right there on the low end. So 57 kilograms if someone weighs, which is 125-pound female, times it by 35 calories per kilogram of body weight, that's a 2,000 calorie window just for survival, as well as trying to drive some energy for hypertrophy and hyperplasia. If you see the CHO on that third little red bullet point, that means carbs. Let's just assume that their carbohydrate intake is about 60%, and I always said about half your plate. It's 325 grams of carbs or 60%. This is a simple breakdown, and I'm going to show you how I came up with the numbers. But in a perfect world, you're looking at pre-workout at about 60 grams of carbohydrates, during training somewhere about 45 to 50, and after training somewhere about 100. I'm very specific in 60, 47, and 103, but let's just round it out. 60, 40, 100, give or take on that size individual, give or take on 35 calories per kilogram of body weight. That's about 210 grams pre, during, and post. And this is what's important. It's about a 5-hour window, and that's what I try to always express in the process of delivering good information. You have about a 4 or 5 hour window. What are you doing about an hour prior to training? What are you consuming during training? If your training sessions are long, like back-to-back classes you got to teach and you're expelling a lot of energy, what are you consuming post-training? Where are you in that 30 minutes or that 2-hour window? So really 65% of that carbohydrate intake falls in that number 1, 2, and 3, pre, during, and post. And you'll see, again, how I came up with the numbers as we move along. Right now it's a little math. It's about 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight for really good intake, or generally really good intake for eating for energy, eating for performance. Here's a runner. Here's another way that I always try to break this down, because at the end of the day, it's all about what did I put in, and how much you put in is really going to determine your output as far as your performance. If you have a 125-pound female, and again, I use it as a baseline example, weighs about 57 kilograms. Let's say they run about 5 miles a day. And it's an 8-minute pace, about 7.5 miles per hour. That individual is moving. So that's someone in some pretty good shape, keeping up with that pace. If you look where it says 1875 calories for REE, resting energy expenditure, that's taking someone's weight and timesing it by 15. If you look at a 125-pound individual and you times it by 15, you'll come up with 1875. So that's an easy formula. And here's what I want to share with you. 1875 calories for the 125-pound female, or 2,000 calories, is only a 125 calorie difference. And the real true answer is it's easy math. It's only 125 calories. But what's 125 calories? A really big apple, a couple of bananas, a yogurt. I mean, it's very minimal. So keep it simple any way you break down calorie intake. Go 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight to get a good baseline, or take someone's weight and times it by 15. Times it by 15 to get a good energy expenditure as a starting point. The reason I add about 625, if you look at number 3, that's about 1/3 of the calories that they're consuming for baseline. And that's a good formula to look at, about add 1/3. So if this person's doing this kind of training, this kind of running, and is in some pretty good shape, you've got to look at a baseline number and add about 1/3 to it. At the end of the day, whichever way you look at it, this way or this way, it's still pretty simple. Weight divided by 2.2, understand what you weigh in kilograms, and go 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight, or do it this way. What's your weight? Times it by 15. You got a baseline number, then add about a third. Again, the fuel in the tank is going to really determine how well you're going to survive and thrive and really prosper for eating for energy and eating for performance, because I don't want to get away from what we're talking about. That's the real punchline and what we're trying to get. Women got to be a little bit aware here, and that's important because the media loves you slim and slender. And when you restrict calories, this isn't me telling you. This is science dictating, and I'll show you the studies and share information with you. You lower your calories, you can alter your reproduction. Every 28 days, there should be a stressor on your body. And when you're losing that stressor, your epinephrine, norepinephrine, glucagon, estrogen, progesterone, all your hormones can get a little bit bent out of shape, to say it mildly. You could contribute to what I refer to as BAD, a little bit of bone loss, some amenorrhea, not really an eating disorder, but low calories can start to lead a little bit that way. So keep it simple. 28-day stressor on your body is natural, should happen. If it's off substantially, potentially your body fat is super low, or potentially your caloric intake could be low. So just bear in mind with that. And again, I can go very deep into this, but I just want to scratch the surface of it. Here's a good example. Look at the study below, eating patterns and meal frequency of athletes. This type of popular diet is horrendous. This is not where you want to be. Water, diet soda, diet pill, smoke, coffee, use food sparingly. Not at all. Food guide pyramid, whether it's the FDA or Health Canada, still says the same. Eat the most on the bottom, eat the least on the top. When you lower your calories beyond your needs, again, 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight, or weight times 15, and again, generally speaking, not someone who's looking to lose 20, 30, 40 pounds or healthy weight achievement. Very different world. You decrease, and please take a look at why I bold that, decrease your metabolic rate about 20%. Let me help you with that, because we love to throw the word metabolism around. Everyone says it, but let's kind of identify what it means. It's the opportunity to burn calories efficiently. In a nutshell, that's what it is, the opportunity to burn calories efficiently. You certainly don't want yours to be lower. You want yours to be on fire. So consume foods. And I know it's often hard to share with people, eat more, weigh less, but eat more, and you probably will weigh a little less. So calories are crucial, and this type of caloric intake is certainly a priority if you're going to eat for energy, eat for performance. Look at the last bullet point on the bottom. Lowest calorie, meaning capital K, intake at the highest body fat. Lowest calorie intake, highest body fat. Always been that way, always will be that way. Because if you don't feed yourself enough calories, your body will survive on you. And you've worked really hard to increase lean muscle tissue. And if your body can survive on a whole lot of body fat all day, it would be wonderful, but it can't do it biologically, physiologically all day. And you're going to go one step forward and two steps back. So calories, calories, calories. Keep your metabolic on fire. Keep your metabolism nice and strong. Get calories in. And again, forgive me for being redundant. 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight is a good way to start. Baseline point for hypertrophy and hyperplasia, or weight times 15 and potentially add about a third of that number if you're really trying to drive the meter up for performance and for energy. So again, just scratching the surface with some information. Okay, carbs, we all love them and you have to have them. And like I mentioned, about half your plate, somewhere about 45 to 65% caloric intake. It's about 4 grams per kilogram of body weight, generally speaking, for women. Can you go higher or lower? Absolutely. But roughly speaking, about 4 grams. Guys, we can go a little bit more, about 6 to 8. We're nothing special, but the reason we can go a little bit more is we're not built for lactation and we're not built for pregnancy. We have growth hormone, we have testosterone. Women have growth hormone, women have estrogen, progesterone, norepinephrine, glucagon, a whole other world they're dealing with. Estrogen is a fat storage hormone. We're built a little larger. Again, we don't have a Q angle like they do as well. So just generally speaking, our caloric intake can usually be higher, meaning our carbohydrate intake, again, can be higher. This is a good takeaway on the bottom bullet point here. And follow here because this makes really good sense. You eat carbs prior to, meaning what am I going to put in my system about 30 minutes to an hour prior to training. Give or take, eat carbs prior to and within 2 hours after training. Does it have to be within 2 hours? It should be, because you've got a nice window of opportunity to refuel. So eating before and eating within 2 hours after good exercise allows a couple things to happen. Insulin is secreted by your pancreas in response to a carbohydrate feeding, and allows insulin to regulate, meaning regulate, not fluctuate, regulate your blood sugars and keep your catabolic hormones in check. So the bottom line is it keeps you a little bit more anabolic when you consume these foods prior and within 2 hours after training as opposed to catabolic. Catabolic means breakdown. Anabolic generally means buildup. So just trying to bear that with you and give you a good window of opportunity to try to get some of those calories in. Change the screen, sorry. Okay. So eating carbs prior to and within 2 hours after training allows your insulin to be regulated and keeps your catabolic hormones in check. When you move forward with protein, and again, only 3 nutrients, carbs, proteins, and fats, generally speaking, and again, baseline numbers, because there's a lot of science that dictates this. And let's keep it easy. 1.2 to 1.7 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is an excellent formula, very much written in science. Whole lot of publications share those numbers, 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. I've been around this a while, and I just try to keep things real simple. 1 to 2 grams, certainly enough. Women, 1 to 1.5, guys, 1.5 to 2. That does not mean women cannot consume 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. I'm looking at live numbers that say, hey, 10 to 35% of your calorie intake is more than enough in protein. So just be a little cautious about the protein intake and the amount of grams per kilogram of body weight. Generally speaking, 1.2 to 1.7 is science. Somewhere between 1 to 2 just makes life a lot easier. You look at the egg white little symbol down there, and I just use that because it's what's called a high BV. You can see it, that it's a high BV in yellow. That means biological value. The assumption there is that this type of high biological value, the percentage you consume equals the percentage you absorb. So you want proteins that have a high biological value. The percentage you consume equals the percentage you absorb. Egg whites is a good example. Almost all the protein absorption from egg whites is about 99–100% absorbed. Whey protein is a high biological value. Chicken, beef, soy, a little bit lower, but you know, there's good biological value. Plant-based proteins have a very good high biological value. Sprouted grains, green pea, all really high as far as a high BV, high biological value of protein. Percentage you consume equals the percentage you absorb. So you want to absorb what you're consuming. So protein, again, about 1 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, safe numbers. Fat I mentioned before. Think of it easy. Comes from a jar. Not added fat in chicken, fish, turkey, tuna, but added. Sour cream, mayonnaise, butter, oil, cream cheese, omega-3s. What are you putting in to get some fat in your intake? 20%. Fairly good number. 20 to 30 is really some solid FDA or Health Canada regulations, give or take. Monounsaturated, meaning the best kinds of fat to put in. Omega-3s, boy, oh boy, will they be your friend. Really, really good. Your brain will be happy. You'll be happy. Little secret on omega-3s. Some research dictates that it can help control some sugar cravings, just for what it's worth. Omega-3s, cold water fish. I live in South Florida, a little harder to get some cold water fish, but salmon, mackerel, herring, and sardine, loaded with omega-3s, green leafy vegetables, eggs. And let me repeat it again, salmon, mackerel, herring, and sardines, pretty much cold water fish, lots of omega-3s. Fat's a lubricant. Not enough, not a good thing. Too much decreases, drops your nutrient absorption. So you got to make sure you have an adequate amount, not too much, not too little. Again, too little, nails and hair can dry out a little bit. Too much, lowering your absorption rate to get good nutrients in. Okay, so let's exercise along with this fine bunch on the right side of your screen here. And I love these ladies. I've used them for years and years. And for what it's worth, they invented Zumba. So there they are. That's the original start way back about 100 years ago. But in a perfect world, let's start from the top. Pre-exercise nutrient intake. What am I getting in me? What am I going to do? Not a bad start if you look at about 20 to 30 grams of protein and about 30 to 60 grams of carbs that are low fat and low fiber. That's a pretty good window to get something in you to start the tank. Again, can't ride the car without gas. Body doesn't perform all that well without fuel. 20 to 30 grams of protein, 30 to 60 grams of carbs, low fat, low fiber. Remember what 20 to 30 grams of protein is. 7 grams of protein in an ounce. How big's an ounce? About the size of your thumb. So you're not looking at a big quantity. And the average serving size of carbs, again, 15 grams. So you're looking at 30 to 60 grams. Not a huge number. Number 2, good point here. High biological protein prior to exercise increases nitrogen retention. Let's make it simple here. If you're going to put your body in an anabolic mode, meaning build up, your body requires to be in nitrogen retention mode for the most part. So getting in a high biological protein, really, really good opportunity to try to drive that in. Mentioned before about half your body weight in fluid ounces, that's a given. It's not about 8, 16, 24, 32 ounces of fluid, half your body weight. Here's a rule of thumb I've been sharing with people for a lot of years. It's called the tidy bowl test. Turn around and pee. If you pee clear, you're hydrated. If you pee yellow, you're dehydrated. I know it's a silly test, but it certainly tells you how your body works. It should be a good complaint. You got to go all the time. In all fairness, you know your body's hydrated. So sodium, magnesium, potassium, chloride, electrolytes, all these things you lose substantially in any type of exercise for energy and performance. Try to get in about half your body weight in fluid ounces. Pretty good test to try to work with. Protein intake. Right? We love protein. So these are good facts. Amino acids, meaning protein, pre-training, whether you hop, skip, walk, jump, exercise, squat, shoulder presses, group X programs, run marathons. Protein pre-training minimizes your catabolism. That means minimizes your breakdown. And it helps increase protein synthesis, the opportunity to build a little bit more lean muscle tissue. So protein makes sense. Pre-training. Let's back up one slide if I can. How much protein pre-training? Top bullet point, 20 to 30 grams of protein. It's a good starting point, again, based upon your size, your training protocol, whether you're an athlete, whether you're training for fitness, but it's a very good starting point to work with. True statement here, excess protein may affect calcium absorption. I'll go on a limb and say excess protein will affect calcium absorption. Too much protein, you lose calcium. You don't know you're losing calcium because you're urinating it out. So punchline is calcium, not only is it crucial, but what are your bones made of? Ask yourself that question, calcium. There's 206 bones in your body. There's 430 voluntary muscles. You need calcium. Too much protein, calcium depletion. Not overnight, but over the long haul. And I always go back to where I started. Use, abuse, misuse. Not, wow, I ate a whole lot of protein today, but if you had a whole lot of protein month after month after month after month and didn't change your dietary or caloric intake or your habits or your way of life, calcium is on the decline. Just too much protein, you urinate it out. Remember, biologically, physiologically, number 3. About 5 to 6% of the calories and amino acids you need to replace from excretion. So your body eliminates 5 to 6% of proteins via amino acids. Replenish 5 to 6%. So if you're doing 10 to 35% protein every day, which is a standard recommended norm, that's more than enough. When you start to consume 40 and 50 and 60% of your protein intake, good chance you're losing calcium. Let alone, and I'll get into this towards the tail end, boy, oh boy, is it hard to break down. Different nutrients digest at different rates. Protein takes a long time. And let me share that again. Protein takes a long time. Starch and sugars digest very quickly. Protein's a little rugged on your stomach, takes a long time to break down, and too much, again, a little bit of calcium depletion in the process. So if you're going to exercise, you got to fuel up. And let's take a look at why you got to fuel up. Here's a good reason. Start on the left side, okay? Muscle fuel. So if you're going to put in 30 to 60 grams of carbs and 20 to 30 grams of protein, pre-training, you're in a pretty good situation. Bottom left-hand corner of the screen says fuel. Once you cross that threshold, approximately about an hour in, potentially some of your fuel loss could be depleted. So let me address this to my group of people, because I certainly like to run. And if I'm going to run, I'm going to go out there for a little while and run. And if I'm up over that hour window, give or take, without starting to replenish, once I cross into about that 90-minute time frame, look at the bottom of the screen in hours, between 1 to 2 hours, let's follow that red line down dead center, my fuel levels will start to drop at about 90 minutes. So my body needs fuel from somewhere. Well, let's make it easy. If I don't replenish it, it has to get a source from somewhere. And see that nice yellow bracket called protein? That's my lean muscle tissue. So don't live on what you've earned. Keep what you've earned. Make sure you're fueling post 90 minutes if your training sessions are really long. Again, good example for Group X instructors, back to back to back to back to back classes. You know, the balance bar or the zone bar, you can't always cut it. You actually need some food if you're going to go out there and drive calories and push and push and push, or you're training for, you know, any type of hypertrophy or hyperplasia and you really have longer sessions. Got to make sure some fuel's in you. When you fuel and you put in some moderate glycemics and carbs and drinks, like the little orange tag says towards the middle of the screen, now your muscles have fuel to go a little bit longer. So don't run the tank on empty. It's easy to do, but the downside is really horrendous because your body's going to start to live on you, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to drive the mission to go forward, not to go backwards. When fuel runs out, does that look familiar? We've all fallen into this bracket. But here's what's going on with your body. When glycogen runs out, carbs to glucose, glucose to glycogen, you don't have enough fuel in the tank, and your body uses protein or your lean muscle tissue as fuel, not a good thing. It's called hypoglycemia. There's a stress response, and your body starts to secrete cortisol. That's a stress hormone because it needs fuel, and it doesn't have fuel, and it's surviving on protein as fuel for a longer window than it would like to. So when there's hypoglycemia, it's low brain food. There's no carbs. There's no fuel in the tank. So in a nice way, you're a little batty, lethargic, weak, angry. You just don't function well. So low carbs can spill a little excess fat into the bloodstream. It's what's called beta oxidation, a little bit too much fat and too much supply of fat into the liver, and strength is lost a little bit over time. So it just takes a long haul to try to get out of bad habits, but fueling yourself properly is just so crucial. Again, going back to what we're talking about, eating for energy and eating for performance. This is exercise science. These numbers aren't made up. This is stuff that has really strong basis to it. There's definite research that's behind it. So I'm giving you a good window to try to start and try to avoid this hypoglycemia environment, making sure that you're getting adequate fuel in for the long haul. Do you eat during training? Maybe, and maybe not. If you or your client is going to train for an hour and 15 minutes, is there really a need to eat during that training session? But let's kind of go from the bottom up here. Do you have long training sessions? Are they back-to-back? Are you taking a short window and then going right back into the gym? Is there high-intensity training? Is it cardio for duration? Are you doing cardio for 90 minutes, 2 hours, an hour and 15 minutes? Are you going on long runs? Are you teaching a whole bunch of classes back-to-back? You need to eat during training. It's just that important because you will run out of fuel very, very quickly. And as I mentioned a couple slides back, roughly speaking, in about a 90-minute window, boy, oh boy, do you start to drop. And we've all gone through this. All of a sudden, the blood sugars just drop, and you're like you hit a brick wall. So you can't break out a roast beef sandwich, although you probably could. But you want to get some things that are moderate glycemic, low fat, low fiber, get them in your system, and we'll come across a list pretty quick about what to kind of do. Now, here's an instant quick way to drive up a little bit of energy. If you do about a half a gram to a gram of carbohydrates per kilogram per hour of body weight, that's a home run. At least that gets something back into your system, and it's quick and it's easy for survival. Electrolytes we always refer to kind of as Powerade and Gatorade, and those could work. But honestly, a little bit of orange juice, water, and a pinch of salt, that goes a very long way. I always like to say it's homemade Gatorade, but it's pretty much what it is. A little bit of salt as an electrolyte, a little bit of water, and a little bit of OJ. And it's definitely more efficient to consume a little something every 20 to 30 minutes as opposed to a larger amount of calories every hour. So little bits of fueling always goes a very long way. A little bit of research in the middle bullet points, and I often go a little bit deeper into that, meaning protein is normally not the best source during training. It certainly works pre-training and post-exercise. And, you know, the bottom points make good sense, too. Whey protein is a high biological value. It gets in your system pretty quick. And branched-chain amino acids, they help drive up the absorption. And that's what the body's about, being efficient, being a good fueled machine. What can I get in that works quickly and works rapidly and is extremely efficient in the process? Here's a good takeaway also, the very last bullet point. Glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in the body, but leucine and valine are crucial. So if you're getting in amino acids, meaning in a drink, in a formula, in your shakes, leucine and valine are roughly about half your body's muscle skeletal system from birth. So those are pretty important ones to make sure that you're driving in. You can get any brand you like of protein, and you can look at all those amino acid profiles on the back and say, I understand it or I don't. But the punchline is if leucine and valine are up a little bit on the higher end, it's a good thing because that's your body's muscle skeletal system, about half of it just from birth. Here's some quick carbs. I mentioned before, homemade Gatorade, simple electrolytes, OJ, water, pinch of salt. Quick fuel for classes. You don't have time to eat. Well, not a bad idea to get some electrolytes in or something very simple. These foods here, moderate glycemic foods such as raisins, a simple fruit, low fat, low fiber, small piece of a bagel, graham crackers, small piece of a muffin, gels, rice cakes. These are all small carbohydrate intakes in the moderate glycemic world that can fuel very quickly. What you're looking for is what can I get in quick? How can my body absorb it? What can work really well? So again, not a perfect world, but some good science behind it and some easy examples just to run with. Because you, me, and everyone gets the same question all the time, what the heck do I eat? I'm giving you stuff that's pre, during, and post, and hopefully it's falling into these buckets for you to gather good information and dispense and use for yourself or share, again, with clientele. Perfect world, how much? Half a gram to a gram per kilogram of body weight per hour of intense exercise. Half a gram to a gram per kilogram of body weight per hour of intense exercise. Let's define that. In all fairness to our clients that walk a mile an hour on a treadmill and are on the phone and texting and watching the TV and watching the stock market, that's not intense exercise. If you're training with some intensity, you're pushing the needle, you need about a half a gram to a gram of fuel per body weight per hour for intense exercise. Here's an easy example. Someone who weighs 60 kilograms is about a 125-pounder, 30 to 60 grams per hour. That's a half a gram to a gram per kilogram of body weight. Here's a few examples. A couple rice cakes is about 35 grams of carbs, half a cup of raisins, a power bar, a medium bagel. I'm just giving you easy, quick ways in, and here's a better list. So for what it's worth, I went from low-fat milk at about 12 grams or so, all the way up to the top to a baked potato. All these fall from about 50 grams of carbs per serving. Look at the serving size. A cup, a power bar, a cup, a banana, 8-ounce cup of juice. A very quick carbohydrate intake. Pick and choose your battles. Everybody's body is different. Again, nothing more than easy examples for fuel during training, if applicable. So again, figure out who needs what, but these are just easy examples during training. If you move forward after training, that's a really crucial window as well. Perfect world, and it's not a perfect world, but we try to make it, especially for ourselves and our clientele, roughly about 30 minutes within you finishing some form of exercise. You, patient, client, whoever that might be, get a liquid protein in with carbs. It's easy. It's just as simple as put it in a little cup and shake it. It doesn't get simpler. Water and a drink. Shake up. By example, whey protein is fast digesting, and it starts a rebuilding process. Why? Because it's a high biological value that I mentioned before. Every gram you consume, you absorb almost every gram that you consume. It's about a 98% biological value intake. So it's a high BV. So again, using whey protein, simple example. Eat a meal within 2 hours. Could you go 2 hours in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes? Of course. But if you're going to skip 4 hours, not a good thing. And let's be real. It's very easy not to do. We know what to do, but it's very easy not to do. And our clientele, it's the same way. You lead the horse to water, you can't make him drink it. It's extremely crucial, that 30 minutes post-training, and extremely crucial within 2 hours if, and only if, the goal is eating for energy and eating for performance. If nobody's eating for energy and eating for performance, then these rules don't apply. But that's what we're discussing. And go back to the first couple slides I shared. Know your patient, know your client, know who you are. Is this a fitness person? Is this an athlete? Do they fall in the middle of that bucket? What's their needs going to be? More glutamine, more electrolytes, more amino acids, more antioxidants. It's all going to vary. But the only way to determine that is determine who is this person, what are these goals, now I know how to feed them, whether it's you doing this for you or you doing this for someone else. When you look down that meal within 2 hours after training, roughly about a 2-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. Now, specifics never lie, and I'm a science guy. I like to break stuff down, and I use a lot of facts in dispensing information. But about 8 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight and about 4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is ideal for hypertrophy or hyperplasia. That requires measurement. That requires very much precision in the process. So let's just make it easy. 2-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. If you're a real good athlete, and I don't mean you play tennis or you run really well, but you're in really good shape, you're looking at about a 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. If you're in really, really, really good shape and you're performing and you're really at a high level of fitness, it can even be about a 4-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein, and so forth. Simple example, really, really high top athletes, Michael Phelps, for example, they're much higher than 4 or 5-to-1 as far as carb replenishment. There's reasons why people eat 8,000 and 9,000 calories in a day. Not everyone, but some do, and that's why there's 10 gold medals around their neck too. So 2-to-1 ratio, baseline number. You're really in good shape, 3-to-1. You're in really, really, really good shape, and you need calories, and you're training for hypertrophy or hyperplasia, 4-to-1 ratio, and so forth. So again, it's not an exact science for everyone, but that 2-to-1 is always key. Bottom bullet point, still, crucial formula here, solid science, real good evidence, Kleiner, Power Eating, Nancy Clark, Penn State, Gittleman, Superfoods. These are all authors that support the same philosophy. About 35 to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight to support aerobic activity and anaerobic activity. Again, not healthy weight achievement, not I got to lose 20, 30, 40 pounds. Different world. This is I'm eating for energy, I'm eating for performance. How much carbs, proteins, fats before, during, and after. That's nutrient timing. This is the window I'm trying to share with you. Jumping forward, whey protein is a good protein, meaning a biological value post-training, but for the vegetarians and vegans, and I'm a fan there, no question, there might be something better than whey, without a doubt. And if you look at sprouted grains and brown rice and pea protein, these are plant-based formulas, and they're very high alkaline product as opposed to acidity. And high alkaline is a good thing. All organic, 98.2% biological value, 23 amino acids, non-genetically manufactured, hypoallergenic, and gluten-free. Good thing. So you can certainly look in Canada to throw a good accolade at Brendan Brazier and company. I mean, they've got good products. There's no question. And in more of a plant-based protocol for Thrive or any of them, this is good stuff. And it's a high biological value. And again, it doesn't always necessarily have to be whey. I'm just showing you facts that pea protein and brown rice and sprouted grain, these are excellent options. Look at the chart below, and it's worth noting this. If you look at the very far right where it says valine, and somewhere in the middle where it says leucine, look at the green line. It's higher than egg protein and it's higher than whey protein. Sun Warrior is a brand for what it's worth, but it's a plant-based protein. And just to refresh you what I mentioned before, in leucine and valine, half your body's muscle skeletal system from birth, just for what it's worth. And look at which has the highest quantities, the plant-based protein. So I'm certainly a fan in there's no question, and I always consider the source and do what's right, and sometimes it's a trial and error, but these are just facts. Certainly a whey protein is a good high biological value, but he or she's saying plant-based, this is a good window. High leucine, high valine, organic, 98% biological value, 23 amino acids, non-genetically manufactured, again, and so forth, gluten-free, hypoallergenic. So good choice if you go that route, just for what it's worth. All right, I'll give you a couple more before we jump in. Refuel. Why do we have to refuel? Well, we just spent some time talking about it, but again, 30 minutes and 2 hours, that's post-training. You got to replenish your glycogen storage, carbs to glucose, glucose to glycogen. You just went out for some energy expenditure. Just think about you're the car. You used up gas. It's called fill the tank. 30 minutes after, 2 hours after, you'll go a long way if you get that going in your system. You got to repair your system. Why? Because exercise is great, but boy, oh boy, does your body break down. Protein consumed post-training is important. Why? Because it minimizes the damage. You beat your body up substantially. You grow in sleep, so to speak. You break muscle fibers down when you're training, and during the repair time, that's physically when you're growing. So the times you're not training is when growth is occurring, and the times you're at rest mode is when growth is occurring at the high points. Perfect world, 2-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio post-exercise. You're in great shape, go a little bit higher. Growth. Well, not everyone's looking to grow in size, but the mitochondria is the energy factory of your cells. You have about 50 trillion of them, give or take. So the mitochondrial density and the myofibril recruitment, the muscle fiber recruitment, is going to be at a maximum point, meaning post-workout nutrition. For if size is your thing, if strength is your thing, if endurance is your thing, if power is your thing, regardless of what your protocol is, mitochondrial density and myofibril recruitment is crucial to get in, especially post-workout nutrition. And that's what's going to help the growth factor happen. Rehydrate. Forgive me for being redundant. I'm in a very warm environment. I live in the tropics. I'm going to probably dehydrate quicker than I'd be if I was living in Canada, especially in the colder months. So replenish fluids for recovery. Sodium, magnesium, potassium, chloride, that's electrolytes. I mentioned an easy way, a little bit of OJ, pinch of salt, water, that's an easy way. And this is crucial too. Your immune system, what does that do? It fights off the invader, keeps you healthy, helps the common cold and anything else you have a shorter duration in your body. But your immune system's about 70% water. So rehydrate, okay? Half your body weight fluid ounces. Again, good complaint. Use the restroom a lot. Tidy bowl test. It's clear, it's right. It's yellow, you're a little dehydrated. So those are good telltale signs just to give you a window. All right, we'll give you a couple things on antioxidants. It's an easy word. A lot of people like to throw it around, but they're ACs and Es. Food first, supplement second. If I've had the privilege of having you hear me talk about supplements, and I believe it's a course I'm going to do in Toronto, I don't miss much. I cover probably 60 or 70 different items out there, and I definitely talk about antioxidants. And again, food first, supplement second. They help prevent damage. They neutralize free radicals. Free radicals, artery clogging villains, ways that our body breaks down, substances that damage tissues, leading potentially for catabolic issues, heart disease, exercise recovery, but ACs and Es and selenium. Food first, supplement second. Let's blow through these quick. Your body likes to measure some of these protocols, what's called aura, oxygen radical absorption. Foods that are high in oxygen, normally alkaline products as opposed to acidity, flood the body with oxygen, potentially a much higher immune system function. So newborn babies, and think about this for a second. Newborn babies eat poop, eat poop, eat poop, eat poop. They're born perfect until we alter them. And that's called weekends, holidays, weddings, and parties, and we all love those. But why do they eat poop, eat poop, eat poop, eat poop? Because they're loaded with alkalinity. Our bodies aren't always loaded with alkalinity. There's a lot of acidity in our system because a lot of foods we consume are loaded with acid. So take a peek just by example. Here's some foods that are a little bit higher in the alkaline world, going from the acai berry all the way down to some apples. What do they all have in common besides alkalinity? They're all plant-based products, just for what it's worth. There's no acidity involved here because, again, plant-based products. Plants give off oxygen. You and I give off carbon dioxide. Flood the body with oxygen. Pretty good chance you're running pretty healthy for a longer time. Here's A's, okay? A's are normally colorful, red, orange, yellow, green fruits and veggies. Easy ways to get them in. Simple sources I did below for you. High absorption rate when they're juiced, blended, and pureed. Why? Because it's liquid, and your body breaks foods down into liquid. Here's another takeaway you should understand, too. We've all heard our entire lives, every one of us, you are what you eat. You are what you eat. There's some truth to that, but there's an absolute truth in you are what you absorb. Because every single thing you consume from the moment you're born till the moment you pass will be broken into liquid form. And how well you absorb that liquid, meaning vitamins, minerals, macronutrients, nutrients, that's how healthy you're going to be. So how does it get liquefied? Well, you got to chew it first, or you're getting it in liquid form. So when it's absorbed, the higher ratio because it's been juiced, blended, and pureed. A's are key. Reproduction, super important. Make sure there's vitamin A in your system. Growth and vision, and again, sources are nice and colorful. Antioxidant. C's are crucial, and I'm going to hit into the C's for a couple minutes here before we close out. C is vulnerable to heat and can decrease potentially in cooking. So when you're cooking foods, you're not losing C completely, but you're losing some form of the absorption rate in C. It's a little bit lower absorption. Iron increases the absorption and the immune function. And again, what do women lose normally every 28 days in a stressor in their body? Some iron. So sources of C are going to be crucial here. And here I put a few down as broccoli and leafy greens and mangoes, cantaloupes, peppers, etc. You can see what I have here. But try to drive that iron absorption up and that immune system function up. And let's take a look at iron because iron's kind of important in the process. Let's go from the right side. Okay? Well, how do you drive a little bit of iron up in your system? Wine, for what it's worth, and there they are. So the red wine driving a little resveratrol into the system, potentially a tool to help control some cholesterol. But white wine's actually slightly higher in its iron consumption than red. So it doesn't mean only drink white. It doesn't mean to drink at all. But if you choose to, the white wine drives a little bit of iron absorption up. Those three vegetables, and peppers, broccoli, and sprouts, and those three fruits, cantaloupes, lemons, and strawberries, have the highest quantity of iron compared to other fruits and vegetables. Iron is absolutely in your meat products, your meat, your fish, and poultry. So if you're a plant-based eater, you got to get iron from other sources, supplements and other foods if you don't do meats. But meat, fish, and poultry certainly has iron. Those particular fruits, those particular veggies, and a little bit of wine. A couple things can drive iron down. I'm not too concerned or too much about acid in buckwheat or soy intake, but the middle two is something we all kind of float around in. Caffeine. This isn't about coffee. Caffeine today is in so many different supplements, in mahung, ephedra, guarana. Caffeine's in a ton of energy drinks, your Monsters, your Rock Stars. We're pounding down some caffeine. Most cases, general numbers, 300 milligrams of caffeine or more each and every day. And remember, take this into check what I share with you. Use, abuse, misuse, more than about 300 milligrams of caffeine each day has a tendency to drive your iron down. Not such a good thing. Got to make sure that iron's into the system. So easy ways on the right side to bring it up, a few ways on the left side to drive it down. Put a little closure to this. If you kind of look here, look at the ages. And the reason, if you go towards the bottom, somewhere between 14 to 18 and 19 to 50, those two line items for females, I did in big white letters for a reason. Most likely, give or take, there's a cycle during those years. And that's where you have to make sure that iron is plentiful in the system, because that's the time when you're losing probably the most. So deficiency of iron, again, I'm going out on a limb here, could lead a little bit towards anemia, not potentially full-blown, but it's a starting point to become a little bit anemic if you don't have enough iron in your system. Dairy, and it's certainly not about never do. No way, shape, or form am I sharing that. I'm just saying dairy can drop some iron absorption. High dairy can also lead to a little bit of a mucoid plaque. It's a gunky type of substance that builds up into the small intestine and sits on top of the villi, which helps absorb all your nutrients in. So it can leave like a little muddy trail, so to speak, in your small intestine where all your nutrient absorption happens. So just keep iron in the back of your mind there. That's a crucial piece. I'll close out with you on the last couple slides here on vitamin E, A, C, and E. Definitely high levels of E in sprouted grains and products, meaning some plant-based foods. Also a little bit vulnerable to heat and loss in cooking. Some easy sources. I just try to break it down for you in some E's. And selenium. Selenium works really well with vitamin E. They coincide. For women, important too, because it helps convert thyroxine into usable form, and thyroxine meaning components of the thyroid that help drive, your fuel levels and help drive your metabolic function, and T3 and T4. When you look at an endocrinologist or you look at an OB and you get a good complete blood work, you want to make sure your T3 hormoned or free T3 or T4 levels fall within those micrograms per deciliter. Again, these are just simple numbers. Selenium and antioxidants when in conjunction with vitamin E, and again, some simple sources. I'll roll it out and put closure to this. Let me share two things. First of all, you gave me an hour of your life, and I deeply appreciate that. And number two is, please, if you find your way to Toronto, all these are done in a lot of detail, an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes, an hour and 20, a little bit longer. Look at neutral numbers. I talked a little bit about alkalinity and a little bit about acidity. Acidity doesn't necessarily lead to sickness, not at all, but the higher alkaline in your system, potentially the better system you're going to run. Your pH level is what it's all about. Tap water is a neutral substance. It's about a 7.3 on a neutral scale. It's going to affect all your cells. And remember, you have 50 trillion of them, give or take, in your body. Too much acid might lower your metabolic process. Take that and understand that. Metabolism, opportunity to burn calories efficiently. Too much acidic intake can drop your metabolic function. Again, opportunity to burn calories efficiently. Over-acidic pH can, not does, can damage some body tissue and potentially lead to a little bit more issues to try to overcome. Punchline's easy. If you keep alkaline high in your system, pretty good chance you'll stay a little healthier quite a bit longer. And the acidic waste normally just turns into these fatty acids and these cholesterols and some kidney stones. Here's a simple chart just to give you an idea. It's not about never do in any way, shape, or form. But look at the alkaline foods up top, mostly plant-based PROTCOL, and look at the stuff down below her. They're just a little bit higher in the acidity factor. I want to share for sure, and thank you once again, certainly for being part of this. Again, you gave me your time and efforts. Special thanks to Jason and the great, amazing people at Canford Pro, and I say this really with passion, and they know me. You guys are the best organization on planet Earth. You always have been, and you're superstars and home runs, and I always appreciate you give me a chance to pour my passion into some attendees. So in closure, gang, if you got anything out of here, one or two or three things, then I hit a big home run. I'm happy to try to help out. I'm in Toronto. Easily accessible if you need to coordinate or get anything to me. And again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll turn it back over to Jason to put any closure on this. But have a great day, everybody. And again, I really appreciate you listening.